conservative, constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
And welcome everybody to another amazing day right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. I hope everybody had a fantastic Thanksgiving and a good weekend off. I know I took a few days off last week. Obviously, those of you who listen to the show on a regular basis know we had just one show last week, but this week we are back and ready to bring you some awesome news. Well, the news itself isn't awesome. The commentary here we'll be going through isn't necessarily great, but it's awesome to be back here where we can go over some of the things going on right here in Kentucky. After all, there's a lot of things going on nationally, of course, but what's going on right in your own backyard? What can you weigh in on? What's happening right here in your state? Because so often when we see these national politics, we hear them talking about things going on over in maybe California or New York and, those places that we generally accept as just really crazy far left places. But what about Kentucky? We're rosy red. We're supposed to be at least. Sure, we have a Democrat governor, however you want to justify that and figure out that happens. Well, you've probably heard my conversation on it, but regardless, we have a legislature that's 80% Republican. We have a Republican majority in the state registered wise. I mean, Donald Trump won the state by huge percentage margins over Kamala Harris. So, you'd say this should be a pretty safe ruby red conservative state, but there's still tons of things going on, even in conservative areas. So today we'll be covering, some of you may remember the show regarding the JCPS Officer of Diversity, John Marshall. Well, now the Kentucky's race baiter, Ricky Jones, our very own Al Sharpton, has weighed into the fray even more. He's decided that this is going to be it. This is the fight of fights. This gives him more opportunity for attention, obviously more opportunity to attract money and followers and everything else to his very racist, divisive rhetoric that he shells out on a regular basis. We'll be digging through that. Also today, Lexington gets ranked by the Human Rights Organization as one of the best city in the state for LGBTQ people and one of the top cities in the country for LGBTQ people. We'll go over why Lexington received that and how maybe when we look at the parameters behind why they got their points they did, we might start to ask some questions about how our tax dollars are being spent. People ask, why do you care so much about things like the Ricky Jones race baiter or the Lexington LGBTQ rankings? Why does that matter to you at all? Well, it matters because this is how our tax dollars are being spent. When we go through those rankings, you'll see ways that our tax dollars are being spent forwarding these ideas and forwarding people like even Ricky Jones and how destructive that is. And meanwhile, you don't really see anything on the right. You see nothing conservative-wise being spent tax dollars. It's not as if our government seems to weigh into both sides. No, instead our government so often is just taking our money and then spending it for these leftist crazy things. And we all are stuck holding the bill for it. And then also in our final story regarding Krampus, the evil Santa Claus. Well, Pikeville was going to do a Krampus event, and it turns out that perhaps, people didn't want to. People had an issue with tax dollars being spent. After all, the city of Pikeville decided to plan a Krampus event, so they canceled it. We'll go over to what their plan was here because, quite frankly, I think they're pretty stupid to ever even try to do this in the first place. And it just goes to show how, these people, these leftists, they just go into everything. All stories today we're talking about is really about how leftists have infected our governments at all levels, whether or not you're in a red area or a blue area. And I think it's frankly because, these leftist activists, these crazy left-wing people are attracted to jobs that contribute nothing to society. Conservatives typically, we find our pride a lot of times in our work and working hard, right? It's the same thing we see Democrats nationally talking about the fact that, these conservative areas, these rural areas are so poor typically, but yet they're so red. Why is that the case? Don't they want their government handouts? And what they fail to understand is that conservatives, whether they're poor or wealthy or what have you, all they want to do is to be able to work hard and keep the fruits of their own labor. They actually don't want your government handouts. They want to be able to provide for themselves. And it's a hard thing to understand. They want worthy work. But because conservatives seek out worthy work where they feel like they're accomplishing something, it attracts in the busy nobody leftists that literally have nothing better to do but then to get into everybody else's business, to go and do those jobs that suckle off the accomplishments of everybody else. They're drawn into the government, into these positions, and it creates just some pretty horrific things and some horrible spending of the money. So we'll be going over that all today. But before I dig down into it, please make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. Make sure you are following the show. If you like what we're doing here, make sure you're sharing it with others. The more people that listen, the more encouragement we have to pump out new episodes more often, of course, because we want to make sure we are connecting with our audience. So like, comment, share, subscribe, leave a review. That helps us too as well. But without further ado, let's dig down into it. So there is an old parable, old proverb about a knight in medieval times who thought he was born to slay dragons. So he went on quest after quest and slayed all the dragons in the land until none were left. With no more dragons left, the knight then started slaying lions. After the lions, he moved on to the wolves. After that, it was the wild dogs, until the knight had nothing left to slay that was of actual threat to the people. So he ended up going on to slay domestic cats and dogs, which made him look like a cruel fool, and it forced the ones that claimed knight into shame and exile. And it's time, and these race baiters out here are realizing that they're getting pushed into shame. Knights of the civil rights, and we're talking about the greats. We're talking about Martin Luther King. We're talking about even Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, great, in the realm of great, I mean great following civil rights leaders. Maybe you didn't agree with everything all of them did. I know some of those are controversial, but at least we could all agree, I think, in this modern time, that what they were fighting actually mattered. Jim Crow laws, separated bathrooms for whites and blacks, Rosa Parks having to sit at the back of the bus just because of your skin color. These were real fights, real dragons that I think we all should agree needed to be slayed, and they did great. But the knights of the modern time race baiters, they don't have any more dragons to slay. They don't even have lions or wolves or wild dogs. Instead, they've moved on to swinging their sword in a field at nothing, and they look like fools, and they're being forced out into exile, but they're trying to fight back. And we have a story about this here in Kentucky. And you may remember about 3 or so weeks ago, I reported on this tweet from the JCPS Officer of Diversity, John Marshall. And in that tweet, he stated that after the Trump election, he had some students call him up wondering, what do we do about this fact that Trump won? What does it mean? And in his own tweet, he said students. Now, keep in mind, he's the Chief Diversity Officer at Jefferson County Public Schools. So students doesn't mean it's college students. It doesn't mean it's former students. He said students. He actually went on to say students and even some adults. So he specified that these were kids under 18 reaching out to him, clearly minorities, asking him, Trump won, what do we do? And he stated in that tweet that he told them that the Trump election and winning means that over half of the white people, when they enter a room, want to do them harm. They're white supremacists, they're racist. He said they want to do you harm and called them racist. So he just said that over half of white people are violent racists in a tweet, and he said it to students. Now, keep in mind, this isn't an individual just speaking his mind, protected by the First Amendment. This is an individual that is being reached out to by students that he's come in contact with because he's paid over $200,000 a year to be the diversity officer at a public school. It's a taxpayer-funded position. It's a place where these students are essentially forced to go. If you don't homeschool your kids or private school your kids or do some kind of schooling and let the state know, you'll find yourself in violation of the law. And the kids will be in violation of the law. So they are forced through the threat of government to go here. And then he's being paid by those tax dollars in order to, quote unquote, educate these children. So rightfully so, there was calls from the legislature to resign, that he needed to resign or be fired because, well, frankly, what he was doing was divisive, it was racist, and it was not his place to be using taxpayer funds in that way. Well, coming to his aid to protect his comments was a professor at U of L called Ricky Jones. I believe he's actually a doctor, so I guess Dr. Ricky Jones would be his official title. But he's a professor at U of L, and so Professor Jones is a well-known race baiter. He's Kentucky's own Al Sharpton. And so Ricky Jones goes out to slay the dragons that he thinks exists, that just don't anymore. He's in the field swinging at nothing. He even tweeted out that the culture of black silence is somehow trying to prevent his fight. You see, it's not enough. He can't just blame white people anymore, because the problem is that so many, including minorities, are recognizing the fact that, this divisive rhetoric of calling half of white people racist because they voted for Donald Trump is ridiculous. And it's not helping their own lives. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, and their lives are not getting better. And so maybe instead of blaming racism for everything, it's time that you try to do the best you can, and this kind of divisive rhetoric that just drives wedges between communities. Race relations are at historic lows as far as the ability to get along with different races in the country. And more, regardless of your skin color, recognizing that this isn't good. It's not helping anybody. And so Ricky Jones, though, Professor Jones, has a problem with that. And so he wants to take on the culture of black silence, the culture of silencing black people, talking about himself speaking up, even though he's surrounded by people trying to silence him, prevent his fight. And that's an odd claim, considering from Professor Jones that he, is paid by a university. He's at a taxpayer-funded university. But not only that, he often has his op-eds published by the largest newspaper in the state, Courier-Journal. In fact, here's just a few of his most recent op-eds. Here we go. Here's one. JCPS equity officer spoke truth about racism. Now KY lawmakers want him gone. Opinion. The disturbing truth about why Kentuckians love Donald Trump, so much. Opinion. Don't blame black men if Harris loses to Trump. Blame white people. Opinion. We should educate people to vote. That includes black history. Opinion. Businesses are wrong if they think race-based attacks on education don't affect them. They lied to you in 2020. Now U of L and others are trying to distract you. That one's about CRT. Opinion. Kentucky's leaders' racist attacks on DEI and education is modern-day McCarthyism. UK and Brown-Forman waved the white flag in Kentucky's ongoing war on black people. So they say he's being silenced, but that's just one. There's 5 pages of articles from the Courier-Journal that he's either wrote or mentioned in, and they regularly will publish his vile racist attacks. So what led to his claim? What's led to him now lashing out? I mean, we see him being published, we see him doing all these things, but he says that there's a culture of black silence, that black people aren't speaking up enough, that black people aren't supporting him or supporting JCPS's diversity officer, Marshall, enough. And so why is he making this claim? Well, it's because he did not get his normal spot on the Terry Miner show in Louisville recently. It was he was denied the spot due to this entire agenda here that he has of deciding to call half of white people, if not more, racist. Shockingly, I guess, the Terry Miner show decided that maybe they didn't want to have somebody on that was supporting and defending somebody that called, round about half of the Terry Miner show listeners, maybe 30% or so, I don't know exactly what their demographics are, violent racists. Maybe people don't want to hear that. Maybe we're tired of that. So he's removed from the normal spot, and he decides that, he's going to speak out about it. This was a video he shot on his Twitter where he's talking about why he was removed. Let's take a listen and see if we can't figure out why maybe he's not as welcomed as he felt he should be.
The chief equity officer for Jefferson County Public School, John Marshall, recently sent out some truth when he said, look, the majority of whites in this area couldn't care less about you. Speaking to some young black folk, they have no problem harming you or yours. That's the truth. I mean, there's very, very little concern or even conversation about black people here, but a lot of attacks. Well, because John Marshall said that, there was a group of white legislators who demanded that he either resign or be fired. They demanded that he either resign or be fired. I call them what they are, white supremacists, because that's what they are. They want to continue to control a space in such a way that any black person who dares to speak out be punished or ruined. And that's what they're trying to do to John Marshall. Now, I do Terry's show for free. I don't get paid for it because I think people here need a different point of view. But let me tell y'all something. Black people in Kentucky live in fear. They constantly edit themselves. They are afraid because they think if they step out of line, white people here will ruin them or absolutely destroy them. If they tell the truth, they'll tell you they live in fear. But let me be real clear with y'all, man. I don't give a damn if I never do another television show or radio show here. I will not dance for you. It is obvious that a good percentage of folks, not all, here, they only cool with black folk who skin, grin, coon, dance, play a little basketball or something. That ain't me. And as James Baldwin said, I am not your Negro and never will be.
You know, it's shocking someone who uses that kind of language would be ostracized from parts of society. I mean, he only spewed out several racial slurs in a short 2-minute video. It's strange to me. I don't know why people wouldn't be around him. Of course, that's sarcasm because he isn't just attacking white people anymore. Remember the allegory, right? This white supremacist dragon has largely been slayed. The lions, the wolves, they've been slayed. So now he has to find something else to attack. And he's decided that if you're not viewing things the same way he is, then you aren't welcomed into his circle. He's decided that if you're a black person and you do not agree with him that half of white people are racist, and you do not agree with him that this dragon of racism is huge and alarming and exists, if you do not agree that when he's out in the field swinging at nothing, there's something there, and you're black. Because if you're white making those claims, he would just call you a white supremacist, a racist. You don't know. But if you're black and making those claims, he's decided now that you're not just a white supremacist. No, he's decided instead he's going to adopt the language of white supremacy, actual white supremacy, and use all the racial attacks he can to demean them, to demean other minorities, to demean other black people. He recently was on with The Groove, another radio show in Louisville, and he was talking about this same subject. Why don't you take a listen? He goes even more in depth here, and you'll hear him using the language, an offensive language, talking about fellow black people. Because you see, Professor Jones here, he doesn't just hate white people. He hates everyone that doesn't agree with him. Take a listen.
So whenever these people start pushing this anti-DEI stuff, later for DEI, man, DEI can go to hell as far as I'm concerned. All right? That's just the name. And most of the DEI officers that they've hired, because there's a trick bag there too, these people are simultaneously the children, the beneficiaries of the revolution that many of them did not participate in. And they're the victims of the white response to that revolution. Now, quite often they're willing victims. What do I mean by that? Black revolutionaries kicked doors open.
Facts.
At the University of Louisville, in government, major companies all over the country, certainly here. I was a part of that revolutionary movement at the University of Louisville back in the 90s, right? We kicked doors open, but we knew that we would not get the opportunities that we created. Okay, we weren't gonna get those opportunities. The white response was, okay, because y'all are foster heart, we'll give you a few positions that could be effective if used properly. But we're going to choose the most milquetoast, non-threatening, passive Negroes that we can find to occupy those positions. And that's what they've done. And so those weaker black people have been put into those positions. And they've survived. They've thrived individually, in fact. Why? Because they're much more concerned about their individual positions than they are collective black power. Here's what they don't anticipate, though. They're so afraid of their masters, their white masters, that they do anything that they want them to do so they don't piss them off. What they don't think about, though, what happens when black people turn on them? Right? What happens when and if black people turn on them? All this is, Miles, is another example to black people here. This is what white Louisville does.
So, there you go. He's backing up what he's even more vile in his racial claims and racist words towards people that he says he's there to defend, supposedly. And he claims the reason why, he doesn't get these special treatments and spots from the white people is because he's not willing to be, their slave, was essentially what he said. I can't even say all the words he would say without being called a vile racist myself. Because you see, like I said, it's not enough that he's attacking white people. I mean, let's look at what he said in the prior thing I played for you about the Terry Miner show. He was talking about calling out legislators for trying to control spaces that black people are in. We're not talking about controlling just random black people. They were talking about dealing with public schools, not public square, but public schools where you have an racial activist being paid $200,000 a year in taxpayer funds, using that purse to preach his racist beliefs on white people to students. You want to go have your little gathering and try to get people to bring their kids to that kind of vile rhetoric, then go for it. But you don't get to confiscate money from everybody else and use your position of power provided to you by the taxpayer, by the laws in this state as well, making kids go there to now proselytize your awful rhetoric. So to get this straight, Jones is swinging at monsters who are black. In his view, these monsters are black because they don't think like him. I think it's more so that Professor Jones here is feeling the pressure of being exiled, feeling the pressure of being treated and ostracized out of society, because people are tired of the racist, divisive dribble that he seems to only be able to spill out of his mouth. You look at his Twitter, it's nothing but a cesspool of racist behavior, not just towards white people, but as you just heard, to black people as well. Maybe he's just the hateful one. Maybe that's why people don't want to be around him. Interesting how people who claim to be fighting hate themselves are just some of the most hateful people around. Moving on from there, Lexington, near the top of the LGBTQ in the country, rated as one of the best LGBTQ nations or states of cities. Sorry, guys. In the nation. We had this here from the Herald Leader. They wrote an article about it titled, "Lexington scores near top in the country for LGBTQ rights, gets highest marks in Kentucky." So the Human Rights Council, which is, that blue, yellow equal sign group, is the national civil rights organization they're quoting here. And they said they scored Lexington near the top of all cities for its policies protecting and supporting the lesbian, gay, and bisexual transgender community. The Human Rights Campaign ranked Lexington 13th out of 506 cities across the country. That puts in the top 2.5% of cities ranked in the survey. And this led me to wonder how the Human Rights Campaign, what do they think is important? How does a city become, highly marked on human rights? You would think that it means that everybody's treated equally. Like that would be non-discrimination. That would be treating everybody equally under the law. But you would be mistaken. Because you see, they do have some categories here, but they also have some bonus points. And Lexington scored 19 bonus points. One of the things they look at here is the non-discrimination laws. And so they're wondering if there's laws that are on the books in the city or state or county or whatever that prohibit people from discriminating based upon orientation and gender identity, sexual orientation and gender identity. Notice too, they're leaving out race, right? So this ranking of human rights, they're only talking about LGBTQ people for this ranking. They're not talking about racial laws. They're talking about specifically carve-outs. And so they say that the state and city score top points for employment, housing, and public accommodations for LGBTQ people. Now, the city scored some flex points here. They scored a point for single occupancy, all gender facilities. Okay, so the city has basically they have bathrooms for people to use that don't identify as male or female, I guess. They also protects youth from conversion therapy. So it's the law saying that conversion therapy, something we've covered at length on the show, is something that they go ahead and deal with here. And both those things, you'll notice, involve expenditure of taxpayer funds. Also as well, under municipality as an employer, non-discrimination city employment, they get top marks. City contractor non-discrimination ordinance, they get top marks. Inclusive workplace, they get top marks. But where they lost out on 5 points here was in the transgender inclusive healthcare benefits. You see, apparently, the state laws enacted in recent years has negated or overrode any positive efforts several cities have made over the years, especially in regard to cities offering inclusive healthcare policies for transgender employees or transgender family members of employees. For this reason, many cities are only awarded partial credit as their ability to provide such benefits are no longer enforceable. So what they're calling on there, they're saying that Lexington receives less marks because the city has said that you can't take taxpayer funds and spend it transitioning the children of city workers. Now, you also get a city employee domestic partner benefit, so you get that too. Here's the other thing here, municipal services, okay? This section assesses the efforts of the city to ensure LGBTQ plus residents are included in city services and programs. Now, you would think top marks means as long as you have no program that says LGBTQ people forbidden from entering, that would give you top marks, but you would be mistaken. You see, what gives you top marks in this case is if you have a human rights commission, a branch of obviously the human rights group that's grading them, a NDO enforcement by Human Rights Commission, and an LGBTQ liaison in the city executive offices. You also score bonus points for youth bullying prevention, for city provide services to the LGBTQ youth, city provide services to LGBTQ people experiencing homelessness, city provide services to LGBTQ older adults, city provide services to people living with HIV or AIDS, city provide services to the transgender community. Now, obviously, the city wasn't not providing any services to any of these people back in, before this was a popular talking point in the 2000s, let's say. No, but it's the fact that they're not saying just provide like they're allowed. They're saying they actually created special carve-out. Here's the thing. Lexington receives 2 bonus points for providing special services to LGBTQ youth. I mean, let's ignore the fact that in the city, in the public schools, only half the kids can read at a proficient or higher level. Literally, right around half the kids can't read. Math and science is even worse. It's abysmal. But hey, you know what we're spending our taxpayer dollars on? We're providing them LGBTQ youth services. That's nice. So law enforcement is another category here. They say LGBTQ liaison/task force in the police department. They received top marks for that. And they reported the 2022 hate crime statistics to the FBI. Top marks for that. Then in leadership on LGBTQ equality, they offer leadership's public position on LGBTQ plus equality, leadership's pro-equality legislation. And then their bonus points was openly LGBTQ elected or appointed leaders and city tests limits of restrictive state laws. So they get bonus points for fighting against, spending taxpayer dollars, fighting against state laws. They get bonus points for if the voters in the area decide they're going to elect openly LGBTQ people. Now, of course, we talked about how Lexington had elected the first transgender, whatever that means, to their city council, ignoring the fact that he had beat, of course, another lesbian individual, or claimed lesbian, I guess. For the transgender person who he had beat was Brenda Moreno, who just had a restraining order granted against her from another female city council member for being sexually inappropriate, allegedly, with her. So, he beat a lesbian, but he identifies as a woman, so that still counts. We still get points for that, so happy day. But one thing to notice about all these bonus points and everything is it's about how we're expending taxpayer funds. Just alone in this grading, we're seeing 5, 6, 7 positions, at least, people being paid probably $60, $70K a year on the taxpayer's dime, almost $1 million a year at least being spent just on the salaries of individuals for the LGBTQ people. Now that isn't equal treatment, that is special treatment. And that's what they demand. And of course, the mayor of Lexington, Linda Gordon, she's very, very proud of the fact that they were able to go ahead and pull this off. In fact, quoting from the article now, Lexington Mayor Linda Gordon said, "In the human rights campaign rankings are often used by companies to decide where to locate. Lexington's leadership, reflected by our Municipality Equality Index score, not only shows our residents a strong commitment to equality, but is also seen by potential visitors and those looking to relocate their businesses." I tell you what, I don't know of very many people in the business world that are looking at the Human Rights Index score before they decide whether or not they want to open up a business in a town. They're wondering how much it's going to cost them to operate above all else, of course. I mean, if they're worried about that, they'd be staying in California. But of course, California is bleeding companies like crazy because nobody can afford to do business there anymore. Linda went on to say, "Our focus on making sure we have a safe and welcoming community is good for business." It doesn't matter. That doesn't affect companies. It's just such a waste of tax. You work hard. Those of you listening to this, I'm sure you do or have worked hard if you're retired, but you work hard for what you have. And at times you've probably struggled to put food on the table. And all the while you're doing that, these types of people are stealing your paycheck and spending it on some of the most ridiculous crap. And I'm just so tired of this. But as more evidence of this affection, you say, well, Andrew, you're talking about Louisville. You're talking about Lexington with the liberal infection. Those cities, they're foregone conclusions. You need to get away from there. Well, here's the problem, though. Because you can even go to, pretty conservative areas like Pikeville, and you see issues. You see the city of Pikeville spent money on a Krampus event. This is reading now from the Mountaintop Media article regarding it. Here you go. This is by Ralph Davis. It was updated November 27th. Says the city of Pikeville had planned a Christmas event featuring Krampus one night next month, but canceled it after getting backlash from some in the community to criticize it as a satanic event. Now, they threw quotations around satanic event. Let me go on to explain how this Mountaintop Media describes Krampus. We'll see if you decide if it's satanic or not. He said, now the city is facing even more criticism for canceling it. Krampus is a half-goat, half-demonic monster from Central European folklore, arising from the same or similar traditions as Santa Claus and the Christmas tree. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, he was paired with St. Nicholas, and the two were said to travel from home to home on Krampusnacht. The night of December 5th, St. Nicholas would reward good children with presents, while Krampus would punish bad children with beatings. Over time, the myth evolved to Krampus eating children or taking them to hell. The city had planned one evening with a visit from Krampus and Lady Krampus, who would pose for pictures with visitors to Winterfest. You know what? Just pause right here. I just thought of this. I don't know this for a fact, but if I was a betting man, I bet you Lady Krampus is a drag queen. Anyways, putting that to the side. Who would pose for pictures with visitors to Winterfest. Those attending would then get a free Fright Bite, which was described as a horrible Christmas treat. The evening would be capped off with a heavy metal Christmas songs at the ice skating rink. But those plans were scrapped after some in the community criticized the event as satanic. After careful consideration, we decided not to move forward with the planned Krampus event, the city said in a statement. While we recognize that the origins and history of this mythical creature vary across cultures and traditions, we believe it is in the best interest of our community to forego the event at this time. The city of Pikeville is committed to offering diverse and engaging array of events throughout the year, celebrating different traditions, cultures, and perspectives. We will continue to explore opportunities to provide enriching and inclusive experiences for everyone. So this was a complete waste of taxpayer funds. They spent, and were planning to spend even more taxpayer dollars on putting forward a goat demon creature to be celebrated. Now, I wonder whose culture you're trying to honor here. Because Krampus is a pagan and satanic figure historically. And while in Europe he has been a part of traditions and celebrations, normally though it's alongside Santa Claus. And he isn't celebrated, but he's viewed as a warning to bad children. That if you misbehave, you'll be drugged to hell, literally. That was in the article itself. It's not something you celebrate with heavy metal music and ice skating and treats and pictures. It's something you look at as a warning. That's how it's been culturally described. And the events surrounding Krampus normally are awful and violent and ugly. In fact, let me read to you. This is from Wikipedia, okay? This is a recount of a Krampus run from 2013, okay? Here you go. Every year there are arguments during Krampus runs. Occasionally spectators take revenge for whippings and attack Krampuses at Krampus runs. In 2013, after several Krampus runs in East Tyrol, a total of 8 injured people, mostly with broken bones, were admitted to the Linz District Hospital, and over 60 other patients were treated on an outpatient basis. This was in 2013. A Krampus celebration ended with 68 people needing treatment for injuries at the hospital, and 8 of them were admitted to the hospital. And Pikeville saw that and was like, you know what? Sounds like a good idea. Let's go ahead and spend some of that taxpayer funds. Apparently it's burning a hole in our pocket. We want to celebrate all cultures, even the ones that end up with 68 people in the hospital. That sounds fabulous. Not all cultures need to be celebrated. We can learn about them, but they don't need to have taxpayer-funded events with pictures and treats and ice skating and heavy metal music. We generally shouldn't celebrate cultures that center around things like child sacrifice, around, cultures that celebrate things like, Satan, cultures that celebrate evil behavior, wrong behavior. You can learn cultures, but we probably shouldn't seek to honor cultures where, for an example, men marry 9-year-old girls, like they do in some Middle Eastern countries. I don't think we should honor that culture. I don't think we should honor cultures of the Mayans and Aztecians who literally practiced human sacrifice. That's probably not a great idea. Not all cultures need honored in that way. But, Pikeville set out and said, we're going to expend some taxpayer funds on this. And that's what ended up happening. Shocking, isn't it? And that's what happens, though. We've given our government up to these crazy leftist people, and we got to start fighting back. The hard part is, as I said at the beginning, so many of us spend our time actually working and doing something. But alas, if we don't start even paying attention here locally, we might lose our entire government. Well, y'all, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Thank you all so much for joining me. Be back here later this week, probably tomorrow. Y'all have a great rest of your day.